Greetings, everyone. This is the paint along. We're with the winter polar bear session. Thanks for everyone joining me. I hope we have a fun time creating this whimsical picture. And now it's time for the instructional. Okay, what you're going to find in your kit is a canvas. Now I'm repurposing one that I've already painted on, so you'll see underneath yours will look pretty pristine and white. You'll have a little sponge brush in yours, and you need to provide your own brushes. My recommendation was a wide flat. You need a little one for the details, and maybe another one to get in those tight corners. So doesn't matter. They don't have to be anything fancy. These are just brushes that I use regularly. The other thing you might want to have is a Q-tip or two. If you do not want to do the fancy snowflakes, you can just make circular dots, and Q-tips are great for that. So the first thing to prep is make sure you have all your paints. You can take the caps off. You're going to need a dish. I have a little palette, or you could use a little disposable plate. You could even use a glass dish. You just really need to wash it afterwards. And 2 containers for water. The reason for that is the dark color, whatever color background you have, whether it's red or black or the turquoise, which is I'm going to use today, is a very saturated color. And in order to not taint your white, let's keep the white separate, a separate brush for the white, a separate brush for the dark color. Now another thing to consider is if you don't want the saturated color, you can create a tint out of what your base color is. So if you got this, and you can make it into a more pastel version of this. If you got black, you can use black, and it's very magical, but maybe you'd like gray. Maybe that's more your jam. So I will show you how to do that. It's pretty straightforward, but most of you will just take the straight up solid color. Brushes, palette, make sure you get yourself some napkins on the side. I keep my paint and water to the right hand side of me because I am right-handed. If you are a lefty, swip it all over. Now I have provided patterns. The first thing is to take the pattern that's provided, cut it out with the scissors. We'll look a little pointy nose, we'll nip that off. And then for the inner details, if you do not feel confident just eyeballing them in, or the face, what you will do is flip it over and your pencil, which you should have, and you just kind of you're gonna make a transfer on the background. And so like where my scarf lines would be, I'm just using the side of the pencil. My favorite kind of pencil, Dixon Ticonderoga, shameless plug. I don't get any money for it. Just love their pencils. Okay, so, and here we'll do this to this guy. If you feel confident in your drawing and recreating skills from a picture, no need to do this. So I like to paint standing up. If you want to sit, you can. If you have an easel and you want to paint it in this type of position, that's all your call. So let's position him or her, whatever, whereabouts you want it. And then you're going to just take your pencil and lightly trace around your pattern. Now, I will say when you execute this painting, it's supposed to have sort of a handmade, primitive, folksy effect. It's just supposed to be fun, whimsical. We're not trying to get some ultra polished, completed project. So inaccuracies or crooked lines or textures all add to the charm. And I think everyone will turn out just great. Let's see, lift it up. Did I go all the way around? I did. So then now watch, I'm just going to press and go over this. And when I lift it up, there it has transferred like magic. For those of you that remember carbon paper, that's how it works. All right, did I do that, guys? See, I don't need that. For this, I'm just going to hand draw it in. You can also do that as desired. Get the other guy in there. Little friend. Now I'm not pressing really hard because you have to cover this up with your paint. And I cannot stress to you enough how important it is to keep your white clean. And a little nose and the mouth. Now, that being said, I'm going to gently just draw. You don't have to do it exact, just you can make your own little kind of wavy foreground line. And if you want the baby bear if you want it simpler and to go up here so you don't have to paint that little strip there, you go ahead and do that. So then you're also going to want to add your middle ground. See, I'm going to visually connect it, and it's going to have a little curve there because there's a little rolling hill. We'll worry about the trees later. The first thing you want to do is you will take your sponge brush with your base color. As I suggested, if you wanted to make a pastel, you can pour your paint out. Now, I hope to heck there's enough paint for everybody. I think there should be. This paint is, you dilute it with water. And so you should have enough, but keep your white because you're going to need multiple coats. So I notice I'm not dipping it in the water because we don't want it too diluted. And you're just going to start painting straight across. Don't worry if you cannot do this exact. Now I will add a tiny bit of water. I don't want a ton of water. Now if you have a flat brush, you can just go for it and use that instead. The sponge brush adds a nice thin application. Now, also I would say if you want to draw in your bear after you paint the background, you are welcome to do that. However, it's going to take a lot of coats of white, and so I don't really recommend it. Go. I kind of just push. And you are going to have streaks, that's part of it. With your second layer, it will cover it up. My sponge brush is a little different than yours. I think you'll have more skill. So I'm not even going to use this because I don't like this. I take it in my palette. I do add a little water now just to make the viscosity of the paint smoother. And you can see how much more beautiful an actual brush is. And this is what I stand so that I am not constricted. If you're sitting like this, you might feel like you can't, because you want the full range of motion. You want to paint from your elbow, not so much your wrist. Then you can have a lot more control. And because you will be painting multiple coats on your background, expect a little bit of hang time in between while you're waiting for it to dry. I mean, you can paint right out of the cup too, if you are using, if you're just going to stick with the color as is. And it does dry pretty quickly. If you do want to make a pastel version, you better mix up enough. But then you have to save a little pure for the middle ground. because the middle ground is going to be a mid-tone of the actual original color. I'm getting those little tight spots. I dip frequently, but I'm not dipping the whole brush in. You kind of go halfway, dip off the excess water. Otherwise, the paint will become too thick. Now, if for some reason you run out of paint, you can A, call the library. We should have some extra. Or B, use what you have at home. Or C, this is apple barrel, just liquid acrylic. So there's your first coat. Now, I also like to paint the edges of your canvas. And this shouldn't be too runny, so it's not going to run if I tip this. I like to paint the side because it gives it a more finished quality. Yep. Whoa. Don't despair if you're not whizzing along as fast as I am. A, we're doing a video, and B, I paint a lot. So take your time, enjoy. And now you can even start recoating while it's still wet. Dipping and dipping and mixing. Like so. All right, while this is drying, see, I'm not going to worry about that. We'll cover that up. Now what you want to do is you're going to scoop a little, enough. You want to have enough to do this, and that's probably enough, but then you want to save some for your recoating. So I'm trying to debate here. Do I recoat so it's clear? Yes, we're going to recoat. So we're going to pause just for a moment to let this dry and recoat. All right, we're back. It was brought to my attention, blue paint recipients, that the filter on the camera is not showing the blue. So you actually do have a turquoise. I'm actually using a turquoise color, but if it's not registering as such and it looks kind of more like a royal blue, that is due to the camera, not reality. Okay, so now the middle ground. And this is also how you would do it if you were going to make a lighter sky than this. So remember earlier I poured some of that in there. Now a tip, you never, ever, ever try to add a darker, this is not the way to do it. You want to add a darker color to the white. Typically you don't add the white to a color because it will overpower it. So I'm just going to move this next door with the abundance of the white. And I want to mix it up thoroughly. Notice I'm using the paintbrush I used because it already has the paint on it. Again, if you would like some swirly variations, you sure can do that. And this is almost one little cupful here of paint. I don't know, it's a half a teaspoon, which should be plenty to paint this little area in. Now, if you wanted to do a color like this for your background, you just make sure you mix up a big enough batch. And then your middle ground color here would be a shade even lighter than this. So, here we go. We're gonna, woo! Do you see how that's really still too dark? That's why we follow my own advice and pour the white in first and then add the color to the white. The darker color always gets added to the white. There we go. Because it will dry darker. There we go. That's a little better, huh? Woo. Now, I'm going to leave some of those variations in there. Now your white foreground line is going to come in and cover up any roughness. Again, I like to add a little water as I go. You can come back in with your smaller brush if you feel like that's a better way and you don't have as much control. Take your time, do it, paint it how you like it. Now I'm going to smooth these out by making them go a little more horizontal. So I'm not too worried about the color variations, but we'll keep it going sort of in a horizontal planar motion. And once again, wrap around the edges for the finished look. You can smooth it out if you like. There we go. And plenty. Don't worry again about getting exactly up to the polar bear edge, because you're going to go over it with white and then you're going to go over it with the cream. So the edge doesn't have to be ultra precise. Now notice I'm just going to do a big swatch in there. This brush has the capability, because it's got a very sharp corner, to get in these little tight spots, but you are always welcome to use a smaller brush of your own to get in there. And another fun fact, anytime you add white to a color, it's called a tint. Anytime you add black, it's a shade. So we just made a tint of turquoise. And there we go. Smooth it out. Again, the texture is fine, keeps it fun. All right. There we go. Now, I'm going to dip this in the water. That in the water. I will remind you that this is paint that will not come out of your clothes. Once it dries, it turns into a polymer, a plastic. And it won't come out. So if you do get it on yourself, your clothes, they need to be washed like immediately. It'll wash off your hands. So let me move these things out of the way. Now we want to do the foreground. And as I said earlier, you want to start with a clean brush, entirely clean brush. If you only have one flat brush, you need to wash your base color out, and then wash it one more time with soap and water, and then dry it, and then get totally clean water. Otherwise your white will be contaminated, and if you want it to look white, it won't look white anymore. It's your choice if you don't care, but to retain the white in the picture, this is how we're going to do it. So now I really need the white to be pristine for the rest of this. The polar bear is white, the trees are white. Now the polar bear might take 2 coats, and the foreground 2 coats. The trees were only 1. So now we just do the foreground. I did mix a little water in there. And I usually get a good amount of paint on my brush. You can see where there's some water in there. Mixing. Because your paints may have sat for a few days before opening the kit. Whee. Now note, I'm coming up over this. Mine's a little wet right now. I'm gonna go around. Whoa! This happens, you just take that right off. Whee! I'm gonna take a little Q-tip. And now I have to let that dry. See, it's perfect when you see a mistake happen, because then I can show you how to fix it. This, I'm not mixing anything. I'm just using the straight up white right now. Got my little edge going there. Oh, look, it blended with a little bit, but I like it, so we're going to leave that. You can even add a little in the foreground if you want, the slightest little amount of the blue. And as always, paint the edges. I really appreciate the person who's doing all the videos. They're very patient. So a shout out to the video person. Okay, now I can see here there's a shine there, so that's still wet, so I really don't want to do the polar bear just yet. You just want to make sure the edges are dry. You could do that. Well, golly, let me find a clean finger to see that no paint's coming up, so then I can go in there. If you want to, I have the confines of time here a little bit, but you won't. You should wait to make sure it's dry. So then you're going to go back in there, and now you can see how the white will or will not cover this little smudge here. You can still see a little ghost of it. Now I'm not doing a super thick coat on the bear's tummy because I want to remember where my pencil lines are. And if you paint it too thick, you won't see them. Again, don't worry about how precise it is. Now notice when I paint, when I'm getting an edge, I get a good amount loaded on the brush. If you haven't painted it, and you use the pressure, the springiness of the brush. So here we go, we're going to do this. See how you can still see the ghost of the line under there? That's what I'm going to need for when my cream goes there. Again, if you want to use a smaller brush to get in those tighter spots, you go for it. Still a little shiny there, so I know that's still wet. Pretty confident this is dry. Now notice there are variations in my background. If you want it completely solid and opaque, you might have to do 2 or 3 coats. Now where his foot or her foot meets the snow, you just paint right in there because you will add the cream later. All right, I'm going to hold off on that because I can tell that it's still wet. Push that up into the little ear. And then do hold it. I kind of paint with the shape of the animal, so he's kind of got a round tummy, so I kind of do some round motions there. And that's almost dry, but not yet. A little more water. Now I would say for the scarf, if you're not using your brushes, right away they should be in water, but I'm going to use mine right away, so I can set it there. This is a nice flat, little straight, crafty kind of brush. These are nice for the scarf because you can get some really crisp little lines. There we go. And I'm adding a good amount of pressure to the brush, see, because it's kind of springy. You want the brush to flow on the canvas, so water is your friend, but not too much. Again, don't stress if it's not perfect. It's supposed to be just fun, and it's supposed to look hand painted, so. Alrighty. Now see, I got a little bleed under there. We can use this little guy. There, get in that tight spot. There we go. All right. Now, I'm going to go ahead and get the cream color. I'm gonna dip this in the water just like this. I don't want to completely load it with water, and I'm going to rest it on my lid. That's a cheat. So we want to get the cream, so you're either going to want your flat brush, or maybe you have one of these rounds. This is a number 6, and we want to do the contour lines of the polar bear, and we're going to add some contour lines in the foreground. You can use cream. You could even use the blue if you wanted to do the contours on the polar bear. The cream is just, you know, a fun side color. Add some water, or pour some in here, and then you can add water to it because it definitely is a little thicker right out of the bottle. Mix it all up. Okay, so then we just want to follow the outline of the polar bears. And I will say, you're going to pour a little of the white in too, because you're going to simultaneously dip in the cream and the white, so they're kind of blended together, because we're not doing it while it's wet. So I want to, see, I added some more white in there. Now I'm going to get the cream in there again, and this is going to be where the pencil lines are. And it will dry darker. There we go. So just to add some little contour lines. Now we start on the big one. Now, if you get too thick anywhere, like if you make this line too thick, you just wait for it to dry, and then you can add the white over it. If you have kept sort of a wet edge with the white, it'll blend in. It's just to add a little contrasty type of shadow. There's one under the scarf line. That will help you remember where the scarf is. And above. Go around the ear, the head. And see, now this would be where this color is going to cover up the white and the blue. If not, you're just going to have to keep adding more layers till it's the color you want. Now the legs that are in the background or behind, we're going to make them all cream or antique white. If your paint starts to feel thick on your brush, get a little water on it. Just don't dump your whole brush, just dip the tip. Okay, now we're going to add our contour line on the snow. Go right up there on his foot. This is where I'm going to want some more water. So notice it's not a super perfect line. We don't worry about that. But if you're doing blue and you mix the cream with the blue, it's going to make a weird green color, and you probably don't want that. Okay, now I can go back with my white brush, and I'm going to go right up to the wet edge of the cream I start painting my white and then I kind of blend the two edges together. Don't worry if you got some cream in your brush, that's why you're going to dump some in your bowl. And it softens your contour edge a little bit. We'll just go back over that and cover that. I'm not going to worry about these things. Going back in with the white on the wet edges to do my polar bear now. Don't overdo it on the cream because you want to retain the whiteness of your polar bear, but it just softens the edges of the cream a little bit. There we go. And scene. Okay. I think it's safe to dip this in there. Can't remember if I painted the bottom edge, and I didn't, so I'm going to do that right now. And there we go. All right. The details are the trees and such. So the trees are next. I did give you a pattern for the trees. If you would like to use the transfer method as earlier and color the back with the pencil and position the trees like they are in the picture, that is your choice. Or you can freestyle it like I am going to do now and put the trees in any way you would like. So back to fixing this, you just wait till it's dry. Let's find me a brush. I think I'll use this one. Make sure you rinse it really well. So I haven't used these yet. Whee! And I'm just going to go back in because I still saved some of this. Wasn't that smart of me? And you're just going to go paint that in there. It will dry darker, so don't worry about it too much. You can also go back in and you can paint over just about anything if you want to add some other little textures. Now, rinse it in the other water if you still have it. Don't mix it in your white. Want to keep that clean. The other thing is yes, I said I have to wait for that to dry, but we'll just skip that. And to make your trees, you want to mix up the white. Take some white, pour it in your little palette divot. This is a little bit more liquidy because you have to paint longer lines. And you can decide what brush you feel comfortable with. So I did this one here. Now you can paint top to bottom or bottom to top. And we'll just paint it right here. We're going to paint a line. You know, if you want it real straight and fancy, you can go ahead and get your painter's tape and put it out there. So these are really pretty easy to do freestyle. You're just going to make some sort of V's spaced apart, re-dipping when the brush gets empty. And each subsequent V is a little bit longer than the other. You decide how many you want on there. And then the top has a little V. Again, you can re-go over any lines that you would like with a second coat. And then there's a little V here. And then there's just little V's on each branch. Nope, I'm just doing one side at a time. And my consistency is like thick cream, so I don't have to reload my brush too many times. A little bit down and then a little bit down, and there you go. So you can, again, you can coat that a second time if you would like. The next tree is the triangle tree, and you can rearrange these any way you like. This is going to get a little tricky for me, just because some of my stuff is still wet. This is where you might want to sit down because this does take a little bit of finesse. We're going to paint the tree first, and guess what? We're going right over the scarf. So don't worry about it if you go right through your scarf or not. Whoa. And don't worry if your lines aren't straight. That's part of the fun. And this tree can go all the way down here. So just for funsies, let's try the other brush, just so you can see what it's like to use a different kind of brush. I like to wipe off the ferrule in case there's extra water on there so it doesn't make a surprise on my painting. So this is going to be a little more controlled and a little more precise because the brush is just designed that way. And now each of these little V's, you can go down and do one side. And they're getting a little bit longer each time, like a tree. Whoops, dip in there. And I got the brush just perpendicular. Don't worry about painting on the scarf because you're going to cover it up anyways. Voila. You can add, maybe we want more in there. Do we want more in there? We could squeeze another one in there. This is really up to you. And now the last tree is the triangle tree. So again, paint right up to over the scarf. We'll make a big V. I know it's scary sometimes painting over your painting that you just painted, but don't fear. This tree, you paint the V, and then you paint a line right up the middle. And then you're going to paint a horizontal line here and a horizontal line here. Kind of would be there. We'll see a little bit of it there. Now this is why you might want to use the drawing and you might not. So we'll just go do that. And then it's like a little inverted triangle there. There's one, and you finish the triangle. Just finish the triangle like this and paint right over your scarf. Just pretend you're doing the whole thing, and you kind of eyeball where it would finish. The end. If you're worried about little stuff like this, you could take a little wet Q-tip like I showed you before, but you really don't want to go back and start fooling around with messing up the background. There we go. Good enough. Now again, you can go over this a second time if you like. For your snowflakes, again, the Q-tip, just dip it in there. You roll it around, and then completely perpendicular to your, if it's horizontal, it makes perfect little dots. Reload it. Like I said, you might feel content to, this is all the snow you want. You don't want a fancy snowflake. If you want a fancy snowflake, those were not included in the pattern, but they're very simple. The hardest one is the one with the little square in the middle, like this. You just can make yourself a little square. And then out of each corner of the square, paint a line, kind of like those God's eyes weavings. And in the middle of each one, the regular snowflakes, just your standard. Make an X. You can do as many as you want. If you own only 6, you do only 6. Just make sure that your X is wide enough. And then you kind of have to position where you want them so they don't look like they're weird in weird spots. So we want to do a 3. So we want to do a nice X in there, like so. And then you're going to come back in with your Q-tip and embellish these. One in the middle. One. The harder you press, the larger the Q-tip dot is. If you don't like this little depression in the middle, just come back over and redo it. know what, I'm just going to put one right there. Look at that. Whee! For these, you can see I did it around the edges like this. You can embellish them any old way you would like. You can even come back in if you want a little one that has, you know, dots in between like this. And that's that. Now, we need to go back in and finish our polar bear. You can refine all these things with the details. So you can see mine, I want to get rid of this right here because I want it to look white. That's a little dipped. And now you would take your fine detail brush, and this is where you will put the, now if you had red, you got a little pink for the ear. If you got the blue, you can add a little blue inside the ear like this. I'm putting a little dot of the blue right on there, and then I'm going to mix the white right over it. He's got little ears too. Or, you know, you could scrounge up your own. See how that turned kind of green? And if you don't like that, just skip that. You don't even have to do that. So rinse, rinse, rinse. Now, I like to pour it in here so that I don't have to mix it up. You should have plenty. You don't need that much. I like to mix it up, and then you don't want paint all over the tip. You just want this on the brush. And this is where, again, you might want to be sitting if you would like your hand to be supported on the actual canvas so you don't make a mistake. And then you just paint the U shape for the closed eye. And then there's sort of another C shape for the mouth. And you might not see the nose again because you might have painted over and off. But you can refer to your drawing to figure out where that goes. Mine's going to look a little gray because I mixed it with the white. And there you go, right to the edge. If you want to add a couple whisker dots, you can go ahead and do that. Same with the little one. Make sure your canvas is dry though before you do this, otherwise you will have paint on the side of your hand, which you can redistribute to your canvas. Probably not where you want it. If you really don't feel confident doing this, you could add these accents with a black Sharpie. That's, you know, totally up to you. The last thing is the scarf, and that's really your choice of what color you want to make it. I like to go in and paint my, it's just going to be little rectangles. Hopefully you can still see your lines. If you want to draw this in advance, because it's, you know, you want to be more precise, you can do that. And I'm going to go all the way up there. The other way you can do it is this snappy little brush again. Make sure it's clean, otherwise you'll make gray. Mix up a batch. And this type of a brush will make a nice, it will fill in your little square. If you've already pre-painted your outline though, it makes it all the easier. So this is probably one of the more challenging aspects. But if you have that square tip brush like this flat brush, you can get in there pretty good. Now you can also, you can make a black line if you like. You can go back in with your cream after this is dried to really make that pop. That's entirely up to you. So I'm gonna go in here and, now this is all still wet. You don't wanna paint your scarf details until your trees are dry. But I'm gonna go in here and do this like so. Again, this is just for the video purposes. You all will do a much better job. Now you need to know on the drawing where your scarf, there's a front piece and then there's a back piece. I'm just eyeballing this. You can redraw your pencil line if you really want to. There we go. And then come back in. Now you can see where the paint is mixing a little bit. If it bothers you, do a second coat. If it doesn't, just leave it. But is my bear wet? I don't know. Again, this is probably the most precise aspect of it, and it doesn't have to be. If you want to just go in there and do it like so, again, that's your choice. I'm going to use the other little brush to do the scarf behind. Make sure you got enough paint in there. And note the stripes are just little vertical stripes. You can do whatever you want to your scarf, in fact. But here's the spot where the pencil line would be, where the front meets up with the back. So make sure you follow that contour and make sure your stripes aren't really in the same place as the other stripes. So I'm gonna do this on this one, but you don't have to do this on this one. You can outline the whole thing if you want to show the separation. You don't have to. And if you want to add fringe on your scarf or whatever, you can do that. So I'm going to go back to the cream one more time here so that you can go up against along the scarf to really make it pop again. Like so. Now, I think that's it. I think we've finished our magical winter wonderland. I'm going to add a few more. You can even add snow down here if you want. It doesn't have to be in the background. This is your painting. Stick another one here. Fill it in. I mean, you could make a veritable blizzard here if you wanted to. And voila! Refine.